I watched my wife open the motel room door for another man, and she had no idea I was just across the street, filming everything. This is the story of how I found out, and what I did next. My wife has this uncanny ability to read me like an open book. No matter how much effort I put into planning a surprise dinner or changing things up, she always guesses where I'm taking her. It's like she's got a sixth sense, not just for dates or routines but for moments when I'm quietly craving some affection. She knows me inside and out. From those awkward, clumsy crushes I had back in high school to the silent frustration I felt being overlooked for that promotion I believed I'd earned, she's been there, absorbing every piece of who I am. She's aware that snakes, no matter how harmless, make my skin crawl. And when I hear a child crying, she knows I feel this deep urge to comfort them, to scoop them up and protect them, probably because my own father never once let his guard down enough to hold me like that. Everything I've carried, every habit, fear and fragment of memory, I've shared with her. She even knows I head out for lunch every day at exactly 11:30, a routine I started back when I was the newest hire and had to take whatever lunch slot was left. I'd always be back by 12:30 because that's when others needed their break. It just stuck even after all these years. But today was different. Today I was breaking from the usual rhythm. The entire team was heading out to give a warm send-off to Bill Thornton, our research and development director, who was retiring after an incredible 36 years. They were even shutting down our entire division to honor the moment. And I was part of it. Lyle, one of the newer engineers in my department, had caught a ride with me to the convention center. I didn't mind. He was young, smart, and I'd been glad to have him on my team. So, Ron, check out my new ride. What do you think? He asked as we pulled out. That's me, by the way, Ron. Ronald Masters. I'm 29 years old, in decent shape and doing fairly well in my career. My background's in mechanical engineering, though recently my job's become more about managing than designing. I've been toying with the idea of enrolling in some evening courses in resource and personnel management, just to stay sharp and grow into this new direction. But all of that, the plans, the lunch, the laughter, faded the second my hand reached for the door. I froze. It was like my brain disconnected from my body. I couldn't move, couldn't think. I just stood there paralyzed. And then I saw her, my wife. She didn't push him away. I kept waiting for her to recoil, to slap his hand, to make it stop. But she didn't. Instead, she shifted. Opened her legs wider. Inviting him in. I felt the air leave my lungs. My whole world tilted. This wasn't just a mistake. This was something I never thought I'd see with my own eyes. Whoever the guy was, he had to have at least a couple fingers inside her. It was the only way to explain the way her body moved. The length, the position, it left no room for guessing. There was no doubt what they were doing. She didn't even glance around to check her surroundings or wonder if someone might be nearby. If she had, maybe she would have noticed the big dark SUV just parked nearby. But she didn't. And even if she had looked up, the tinted windows would have kept me hidden from view. Sherry had no reason to believe I'd be anywhere close at that hour anyway. She knew my habits down to the minute. Lunch break was over half an hour ago. I wasn't supposed to be there. But what tore me apart more than the act itself was how little she cared, how little regard she had for being seen. Anyone could have been watching. It didn't have to be me. Yet she was so swept up in it, so lost in the moment, she gave no thought to the world outside that car. Later I tried to bring it up, carefully. I didn't accuse. I just poked around the edges looking for cracks. You ever think maybe some guy might take advantage just to get in your pants? I said, keeping my tone casual, almost detached as I studied her for a reaction. She was skilled, I'll give her that. The only hint that my words struck a nerve was the way her shoulders tensed, just barely. That's a strange thing to say, she replied, lifting her brow with a sort of practiced curiosity. I stared at her, keeping my expression as neutral as I could. I didn't let the fire in my chest reach my eyes. I just gave a half shrug. It happens, I muttered. Remember Katie? That girl I had to let go last year after she got caught messing around behind the warehouse. I tried looking into Sherry's eyes then, tried to find something there. Guilt maybe. Regret. But whatever I was hoping to see, it wasn't there. And in that moment I think I stopped expecting it ever would be. She lost everything, I said, letting my words sink in. Her husband kicked her out. Took both kids. That little fling cost her their marriage, the other guys, and pretty much blew her whole life to pieces. All for a cheap, dirty thrill in the dark. I didn't hide the bitterness in my voice. Let it bleed through on purpose. Sherry barely flinched. Just a flicker, a blink too slow, a breath too short, but her face stayed composed. Well, she said, calm and smooth, maybe she deserved it. That's when it really hit me, how far gone it all was. I tried to look back to trace the beginning of this betrayal, but I came up empty. No warning signs. No changes in her attitude. Nothing in our routine that raised alarms. But maybe that's what hurt the most, that I couldn't even pinpoint when it started. Only that it had. And now it didn't matter. The facts were clear. It was happening. My wife was cheating on me. And I wasn't going to live like this. Wasn't going to get up every morning wondering who she was with while I was out grinding through my day. I wasn't the kind of man to pretend everything was okay when my world was quietly falling apart. I'd never been religious, not the type to sit in a pew or turn to scripture when things got hard. But I believed in respect. I believed in loyalty. And I believed in knowing where you stood with someone. We'd built a decent life together, both of us earning well, managing to save, to upgrade. We bought good furniture. Quality stuff. Even the cars were close to being paid off. We'd been smart with our finances, made balloon payments, chipped away at the loans bit by bit. But if I wanted my share of what we built, if I wanted a clean break without being left with nothing, then I needed proof. Not just suspicion. I needed her caught in the act. Tuesday rolled around, almost 3 weeks since I caught Sherry letting that stranger grope her like it was nothing. I'd been watching and waiting for a moment to act, and this felt like it. She told me she was planning to go out. Some of us girls might be heading out tomorrow night, she said casually, like she was talking about picking up groceries. I kept my voice as warm as I could, tried to sound like a man still invested in the normal rhythms of a marriage. Sounds fun, I replied. What should we bring? Just bring your better half and a big smile, she said with a chuckle. I forced a laugh, but inside I was hollow. Everything that used to bring me joy, her voice, our life, even the small stuff, had gone gray over the last few weeks. I was only going through the motions now, trying not to drown in the silence behind my smile. Okay then, she said after a pause. I'll give you a call once I know the details. Then she added, Ron, Tom and I are really happy for you and Sherry. You two seem to be in such a good place lately. I froze. There it was, confirmation, or at least a hint. Something had happened between Tom, Sherry, and Las Vegas. And now this girls' night out wasn't what it seemed. I didn't know the full story about Vegas, and I had to let that sit, for now. But I did know she wasn't heading out with girlfriends tomorrow. Not even close. There's a strange kind of arrogance that seems to creep into people when they're cheating. They convince themselves that because they haven't been caught, they must be smarter than everyone around them. Like they've leveled up, playing some secret game the rest of us are too blind to see. Sherry had clearly gotten comfortable, too comfortable. That smug confidence was about to work against her. Meanwhile, I was trying to keep the rage from swallowing me whole. I clenched my jaw so much my teeth ached. My chest would tighten every time I imagined her with him, laughing, touching, doing things she used to only do with me. But around her, I had to act normal. Cool. Calm. That made the anger burn hotter. Silent fire. The truth? As twisted as it sounds, I felt a sick sense of relief when I figured out tonight was their next hookup. At least then I'd know. At least I wouldn't be in the dark. So when she finally left the house that evening, I waited. I let her get far enough down the block that she couldn't possibly see back toward the garage. Then I slipped out the side door, climbed into a rental car I'd parked there earlier, and quietly drove off. I pressed the remote to close the garage door behind me, watching it drop in the mirror as I turned the corner and headed into the neighborhood. It was ironic, really. I had to drive slow so I wouldn't lose her. She stopped at a red light and I had to pull over and let her get some space or risk blowing everything. I'd spent the last couple of weeks getting ready for this. Even with the little I knew about digital cameras, the one I picked up seemed like it would do exactly what I needed. And it did. I parked outside a small, beat-up motel and watched her meet him. The light was dim, twilight fading into night, but there was enough glow from the exterior lights to make out their faces. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I raised the camera and began snapping photos. Click. Sherry laughing. Click. His hands slipping inside her shirt. Click. Her head tilted back. The camera's 10x optical zoom, combined with a 4x digital boost, brought everything into sharp, disgusting detail. They didn't even care if someone saw them. The nausea hit me like a truck. I barely made it out of the car before I doubled over on the pavement. Everything inside me came pouring out, violently, bitterly, like my body was trying to expel every ounce of what I'd just seen. I thought it would stop after a minute, but it didn't. The heaving kept coming, long after there was nothing left in my stomach to give. Just dry, painful spasms that racked my ribs and left me gasping for breath. Eventually the storm passed. I wiped my mouth with a crumpled handkerchief I kept in the glove box, rinsed it in bottled water, then drank what was left. My hands were still shaking, part rage, part humiliation, part heartbreak. I felt like I'd aged 10 years in that single evening. The man with Sherry looked younger than me, or maybe it was just the lighting. Hard to say. I could barely hold the camera steady, my fingers were trembling so badly. I ended up having to press the lens directly against the motel room window just to get clear shots. Took me a few tries to find the right angle. Any gap between the glass and the camera caused the motel lights to reflect off the window and ruin the image. But soon enough I had what I needed. Through the window I could see everything. I saw him undressing her. I saw him laying her down. And I saw her welcome it. I backed away, trying not to think. Just move. I headed across the street toward my rental, but something stopped me. I found myself standing behind his car, fists clenched at my sides, breathing hard. For a moment, a long one, I just stared. Part of me, some old primal version of myself, wanted to leave a mark. I wanted him to know he wasn't untouchable. I paced along the sidewalk in front of the motel doors, taking note of each overhang, light post, rooftop edge. I was checking for cameras. Any signs of surveillance. Down near the far end of the building, I found a cluster of dead wires hanging uselessly from a busted junction box. Perfect. No working security. No one watching. If this had been another century, another world, I might have knocked down the door and ended it all right then and there. A duel maybe. Pistols at dawn. At least that would have felt honest. But we're civilized now. These days, if your wife throws you away for someone else, you're supposed to swallow it. Move on. Be the bigger man. A cuckold isn't given the dignity of options. We're just expected to suffer in silence. Still, I did what I could. A small, bitter act that I won't spell out here. Just enough to feel like I'd pushed back just a little. And I didn't feel the least bit bad about it either. By the time I got home, Sherry was already there. And would you believe it? She was in a good mood. Better than she'd been in months. Smiling. Chatting. Acting like everything was back to normal. It was almost textbook. I'd read about this kind of thing before. How cheaters often try to cover their guilt by overcompensating. By being more attentive, more affectionate. Trying to make peace with themselves by treating their betrayed spouse better. For a little while, anyway. But I wasn't fooled. That morning, while she busied herself making lunch, I called my attorney. He told me everything was ready. All he needed was my signature. I could drop by or call anytime. We were set. I didn't say anything to her yet. But in my mind, the switch had flipped. The woman I loved was gone. What stood in front of me now was a stranger wearing her face. I started looking at her the way you'd look at someone who'd taken something from you and never apologized. No warmth, no trust, just calculation. That was the moment I started seeing her for what she really was. And no, I didn't feel guilty. I had no intention of confronting her in some dramatic scene or lashing out in rage. That would have been too easy, too loud. My revenge wasn't going to come with shouting or slamming doors. It was going to be quiet, calculated. And the best part? If it worked, she might not even realize it was payback, at least not right away. I started detaching. Mentally. Emotionally. Even physically. Sherry's face started to feel like a stranger's, familiar, but without any warmth behind it. I stopped seeing the woman I'd fallen in love with. I was already moving on in my mind. The next morning, I was dressed and out the door before she even stirred. I didn't say a word. I didn't leave a note. I knew she'd be confused. Maybe even hurt. But I couldn't bear to be in the same room with her anymore. Just looking at her made something inside me twist. About 3 hours after she left the house, I was back, with a U-Haul. I'd already dropped the camera off at my attorney's office earlier that morning. One of his assistants had printed 2 full sets of the photo evidence. She didn't say much when she handed them back to me, but the look in her eyes said it all. Pity, maybe even quiet outrage on my behalf. I appreciated the humanity, though part of me didn't fully trust sympathy anymore. Everything felt like a performance lately. From here, our lawyers would handle the split. Property, finances, assets. Every piece of the life we built together was now paperwork and negotiation. I assumed we'd both sign, stand before a judge, and move on. But of course, I underestimated how messy it could get. Turns out, even ending a marriage gets bogged down in details. Our attorneys spent hours haggling over things that once seemed so simple. I heard they debated for nearly an hour, on my dime naturally, about whether the flat-screen TV I took was considered communal property or something I had the right to keep. That's the kind of nonsense this process became. Later that week, something happened that caught me off guard. Melissa, Sherry's cousin, had come by to pick up a few things Sherry had left behind. She took one look at the half-empty living room, the packed boxes, and burst into tears before rushing back into the house. Cal, her husband, and I stood there awkwardly watching the door swing shut behind her. "She's a little emotional sometimes," Cal muttered. "I know," I said, almost smiling despite the ache in my chest. Melissa had always been a straight shooter. Honest to a fault. And in some strange way over the years, I'd grown closer to her than I ever had to my own sister before she passed. I loved her for that, her honesty, her loyalty. I took a long pull from the glass I was holding, letting the silence settle. "We're both just sorry, man," Cal said after a while. I nodded. "I know." Meanwhile, Sherry had taken a very different route. When confronted, she'd been defensive, drunk too, and not even remotely remorseful. That part stunned me more than anything. The guy she cheated with? He acted like he couldn't care less. Like he was immune to consequences. There was no apology. No shame. And somehow that made everything easier. Eventually he left. But Sherry didn't show up with Melissa, Cal, Connie, or Tom that Saturday night, which told them all they needed to know. It wasn't hard to put two and two together. Sherry had likely met up with that same guy again. None of them saw her after that brief Saturday afternoon encounter. Not until late Sunday when she quietly reappeared at the airport for our return flight home. No one knew how she got to the terminal. She just showed up like she hadn't vanished for the better part of a weekend. Melissa had tried to talk to her earlier, but it ended as you'd expect. Sherry claimed it was all one big misunderstanding, a terrible mistake. She insisted Melissa was being unfair. When Melissa, never one to hold back, called her out using words like hussy, and a few others I won't repeat, Sherry stormed off in a huff. Classic Sherry. When backed into a corner, she'd always lash out. Blame everyone else. Play the victim. It was never her fault, not even when the facts were right in front of her. That Saturday evening, after Sherry's vanishing act, I sat with Cal and Melissa for a good hour or more. We talked about everything, how this mess had unfolded, where it left me, what came next. Their little one, just 18 months old, started getting restless, so we wrapped up. They kindly invited me to stay for dinner, but I just wasn't in the mood to pretend everything was okay. 3 months passed. The negotiations dragged on like molasses. But eventually, we agreed to a no-fault divorce, fast-tracked as much as Texas law allowed. Our attorneys pushed through a court order acknowledging that Sherry and I were no longer living as husband and wife. Texas doesn't technically offer legal separations, so this was the closest thing to it. It was enough for me. It meant we could start the process of selling the house and dividing the belongings. The countdown had started. In about 2 months we'd be legally finished. I met with my lawyer in his office that day, signed a few more papers, and sat in silence for a while after he left. Eventually I got up and moved to the conference table near his desk. I didn't need to be coached. I didn't need to rehearse what I was going to say. She cheated. I caught her. I was leaving her. To me there was no mystery, no nuance. It was that simple. When Sherry came in, she found me already seated, calm and steady, arranging 5x7 photo prints across the table. The ones I'd taken through the motel window. I didn't say a word at first. Just laid them out slowly, one by one. Her expression went blank. Gone was the fire, the defiance. It was like I'd knocked the air right out of her. For a while she just sat there staring. No tears. No excuses. Just silence. I lifted my left arm and made a deliberate show of checking my watch. "I was told you wanted to talk," I said. My voice was even, detached. "We've got about 55 minutes. So talk." I leaned back in my chair, exhausted, physically, emotionally, just done. I'd had enough of the photos. They were still scattered across the table, but I didn't want to look at them anymore. Sherry kept her gaze fixed on me, clearly trying not to let her eyes wander to the images between us. She took a deep breath. "Ron, honey, Don't," I interrupted gently, holding up my hand. "Let's not start that way." She stared at me for a long moment, saying nothing. Then suddenly her voice sharpened. "Then why didn't you stop me?" "What? Why didn't you say something when we got back? Why didn't you stop me from seeing him again?" I blinked. I had no idea what she was talking about. Was she trying to shift the blame back onto me? "You're supposed to love me," she said, her voice rising. "Why didn't you fight for me?" I rubbed my eyes and let out a slow breath. "Sherry," I said tiredly, "I wasn't there. You made those choices on your own." She looked around the room like she was trying to make sense of something that had already crumbled. "I had a contract with you," I said finally. "A commitment. You and me. Marriage. That meant no one else got to touch you. No one else had any right to lay a hand on you. You let someone violate that. And you let him do more than just that." My voice was trembling, and I fought to keep my anger from boiling over. The pictures had skittered around the table, their edges curled and shuffled by my restless hands. Slowly I started collecting them, stacking them back into a neat pile, one by one, just to keep myself from unraveling. "I'm sorry, Ron," she said at last, her voice smaller now. "I know you don't believe me, but it's true." She was shaking. I told him it was over that night, right after we went into the room. I felt disgusting. Guilty. I told him it was the last time. She reached across the table, grabbed one of the photos and held it up in front of me. "You see this?" she said sharply. He was angry. He slammed into me like he was trying to punish me for ending it. "That's what this is. Not passion, just punishment. A little after you took this." I shoved him off me and left. I said nothing. Just watched her as she lowered the photo. "The courts have everything," I said eventually, voice flat. 52 more days and this will be done. All that's left is waiting." She wiped at her face with the back of her hand. "Ron, I'm trying to tell you that I'm sorry. That I know what I did was wrong. Don't you get that?" "I'm sorry." I shook my head, slowly but firmly. "Okay," I said. "You're sorry. I'm sorry. Hell, everybody in this mess is sorry. So what now?" There was nothing else to say. The damage was done. Later my attorney called. The private investigator he'd hired had tracked down the man. Once he had the vehicle info, it didn't take much. They found the guy's full name, where he worked, even a phone number. The whole file landed in my lap, neat and factual. No emotion, just data. The kind of thing you can't argue with. I managed to find a number for his home. It wasn't hard. When I called, his wife answered. At first she was polite, pleasant even. That didn't last. The second I told her what I knew, everything shifted. Her voice dropped, sharp and disbelieving. Then came the silence, followed by the fury. She was livid. I wasn't surprised when I later heard she'd filed for divorce too. He hadn't just wrecked my marriage, he torched his own. As it turns out, there were apparently 3 teenagers who'd run off from the motel that night after Sherry stormed out. Witnesses? Maybe. Or maybe just kids in the wrong place at the wrong time. It didn't really matter. The damage was already done. Sherry tried to explain it all later with this weak line, "I got drunk." As if that made everything okay. "You got drunk?" I repeated. "Well, forgive me for not handing you a gold star for that, sugar pie. But tell me, who exactly poured that drink down your throat? Are you a child now? Did someone need to pry the glass out of your hand to stop you from making a mess of your life?" She flinched. "But I didn't hold back. No one told you to drink. No one forced you into that room. You chose that. You let him touch you. That's on you." Her eyes welled up. I was just caught up in it," she said quietly. "The lights, the mood. I don't know. Hypnotized? Really? That's what you're going with?" She didn't answer. Just stared at her lap. "You think I haven't had opportunities?" I asked, my voice low and shaking with restrained fury. "You think I haven't been tempted? Every time I travel, and you know how often that is, there's someone. A hotel bar, a friendly colleague, a stranger at a conference. And every time I say no. Because I thought I had something worth protecting. Because I had you." She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. I had to shut that part of myself off, Sherry. Like a faucet. And you just let it all pour out. There was a long, awkward silence before she spoke again. "Ron, if there's any part of you that still loves me, maybe we could try again." But I was already shaking my head. She stopped. Her voice broke. "But you were so good to me that last Sunday. Before everything. Before you left me. You held me. You made love to me. I thought." I looked at her, my face hard. "No, Sherry. That wasn't love." She stared, confused. "I didn't make love to you that night," I said quietly. "I used you. I wanted you to remember me. I wanted to leave you with something burned into your mind." She gasped, her hand over her mouth like she was trying to swallow the truth. "I regret it now," I added. "It was cruel. It was childish. Arrogant. I should have known better. But that night? That wasn't about love. It was about leaving a mark." And then I leaned back in my chair and let the silence settle between us. "I've never shut you out, Sherry." My voice was steady, but my hands were clenched. "I've tried to be thoughtful, even if I haven't always gotten it right. I don't sit around glued to the TV all weekend. I watch 1 football game a week, maybe. I do that just so I can make sure we have time together. I take you out when we can afford it, bring home flowers, little surprises here and there. Maybe not often, maybe not perfectly, but I try." I paused. My throat tightened. I know I'm not always the man I want to be. I've fallen short plenty of times. But for the life of me, I can't figure out what I did to deserve this. I looked at her, really looked, and saw no answer coming. Just that same lost expression. You wanted it, Sherry, I said, quieter now but with steel in my voice. Don't stand there and pretend you didn't. And you didn't just want it, you went looking for it. Right here. In our own town. She tried to protest, but I cut her off. Even if I believe you didn't cheat on me in Vegas, even if, that doesn't clear the slate. That doesn't make this any less of what it is. I stepped back, trying to catch my breath, trying not to explode again. You've got to own this. This didn't fall from the sky like some freak accident. This was a decision. And then another one. And another one after that. You didn't trip and fall into his bed, Sherry. You chose it. You kept going back because you liked it. She just sat there in silence, eyes wide, mouth slightly open like she couldn't quite believe I was saying it out loud. And don't call it a mistake, I added. A mistake is grabbing a can of tomato soup when you meant to get chicken noodle. This was a choice that blew our whole marriage apart. That first time, that alone was enough to burn everything down. The rest was just ash piling on top of the wreckage. I rubbed my temples, feeling worn down to the bone. There's no excuse. There's no magical explanation that's going to change a single thing. The facts are the facts. And no amount of talking is going to spin this into something it isn't. She seemed to gather herself for a second, maybe summoning one last ounce of courage. But in doing so, she completely ignored everything I'd just said. Like she hadn't heard a word of it.